Hi friends, my name is Kelly Dull, and I am a professional baker and pastry chef. You can find me working as part of the pastry team over at Bad Hunter in Chicago, and also teaching baking and pastry classes at Sur La Table in Skokie. I'm here today with Pilot Light to teach you how to make some homemade bread. We're going to be making my favorite type of bread, which is focaccia. It's a pretty easy bread to make. You don't need a lot of ingredients to make it. You do, however, need some time because there's a lot of resting involved with making bread. So we're gonna go ahead and get started, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll feel confident and be able to create your own focaccia at home. The first thing that we're gonna do to get started with our focaccia is mix together 4 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of our instant or dry active yeast. It can come in like a little package, sort of like this. We're gonna put that in with our flour, and then we're gonna stir in 2 3/4 cups of warm water. We want our water to be warm, but not hot. Our yeast is actually a living organism, and if our water is too hot, it will actually kill our yeast, and then our bread won't rise properly. The way that I like to test the temperature of the water to make sure that it is appropriately warm is I usually just stick a clean finger in there to feel it. If it feels slightly warm to the touch, I know that it's gonna be around 100 or so degrees. If I touch it and I find that it's too hot and it burns me, I definitely know that it's way too hot for my yeast and need to let it cool down before I add it in. It's gonna be pretty wet and soupy looking, so don't worry about that. It's supposed to look this way in our first step. What we're gonna do now is let it sit for about 2 hours in a warm area of our house and let it rise. So that yeast is gonna start to get nice and active. It's gonna start to eat some of that flour that's in there, and it'll start to release gases, which will then help our bread rise. We should, after about 2 hours, see it about double or triple in size, and it should be nice and bubbly, okay? One thing that I like to do is either set a timer for about 2 hours so I can come back and check on it and I don't forget about it, or I make myself a little note and mark what time it is when I set my bread or my water and flour mixture aside here. So now we can take a peek at what it looks like. It's gotten a lot bigger in size. It's gotten about double in size or so. It looks really bubbly, still pretty wet looking, but we can kind of see how bubbly and active this dough is looking at this point. At this point, what we're gonna do is we are going to add in the rest of our flour. So again, that is going to be about 2 1/4 cups of flour. So we'll go ahead and put that in. And then we've got a tablespoon of salt and a tablespoon of sugar. We're gonna just stir all of this together really well so that everything's fully combined and we don't see any streaks of flour in there, okay? So the sugar is important because it is food for our yeast. So it's gonna help feed our yeast and that will help our bread rise in the end. It's gonna give us a lot of the gassy bubbles that we need to get a really nice focaccia, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and get a little bit of oil on my hands so I can start mixing this and kind of kneading it together. I often find that using my hands is a little bit more efficient. You do get a little bit messy, but I find that it kind of works a little bit better. So everything's nice and mixed. We can see our dough mixture there. Again, it's gonna be a little bit wet and sticky looking. It's not super smooth. It is gonna be kind of lumpy looking, but that's totally fine. So I'm gonna go ahead scrape all of my dough into my oiled bowl. cover that with some plastic wrap and put it in another warm area of my kitchen. So while our dough is rising for the second time, we can go ahead and get our toppings prepared for when we put it in our pan. So one of my favorite things about focaccia is that it's a cousin to pizza. So this means that you can get creative with your toppings. You can essentially top it with anything you like to put on a pizza. You can put your favorite pizza toppings like pepperoni, mixture of your favorite cheeses. You can put some roasted veggies on top of there, sun-dried tomatoes, olives. You can really get creative here. It's really fun to kind of see all the different flavor combinations that you can do for your focaccia. And then each time you make it is like a new creation. So what I've got here, I've got a mixture of my fresh herbs, and then I'm gonna go ahead and put in my freshly sliced garlic. And then I'm gonna add in 3 ounces of olive oil. I'm gonna go ahead and just give that a little bit of a stir. So the reason that I wanna do this ahead of time is so that it gives my herbs and my garlic time to kind of marinate. It will kind of help meld together our flavors. The flavors will infuse into our olive oil a little bit, and everything will kind of get like nice and soft and delicious, and it'll be ready for us when our focaccia is done with its second rise. So at this point, our dough has doubled in size. We can see some of those bubbles in there from that gas that the yeast has been releasing. And it's still kind of a sticky dough, but again, this is totally normal. So when it comes to our pan, we have a few different options for baking, okay? So you can use something like this, which is like a 9x13 cake pan or brownie pan or something. This is going to make a little bit of a thicker focaccia, a little fluffier. So this could be really good to cut in half for sandwiches. We also can use a rimmed baking sheet. This is a half sheet size. You do want to make sure that it's got some sort of a rim edge here. This is going to be making a little bit of a larger focaccia, but a little bit thinner. This is great for, you know, if you're serving focaccia as a side for your dinner or your lunch or something like that. And then you also have the option of dividing this dough in half and doing 2 smaller sized focaccia in 2 smaller sized rimmed pans. Okay, these are quarter sheet pans. This is really great if you want to top them with a couple different toppings. Maybe someone in your family wants olives and you want pepperoni and cheese. So this is a great option to divide that dough in half and to make 2 smaller sized focaccias with different toppings on them so that everybody in your family is happy. I'm going to put about 2 ounces of olive oil into my pan, okay? And then I'm gonna use a pastry brush and just make sure that I get it all over the bottom and the sides of my pan here. Now I know that this looks like a lot of olive oil, and it kind of is, but that's the thing about focaccia. Focaccia loves olive oil, so we really want to make sure that we've got a good amount of olive oil in the bottom of our pan there. What's going to happen is that's going to absorb into our dough and make it really flavorful. It's also going to help the bottom of our dough get nice and crispy as well, okay? And then lastly, it's also going to help so that our bread doesn't stick in our pan. After it's done baking, we'll be able to lift it out of our pan very easily, okay? And the key here is, like, we don't want to be too rough with it. We want to be sort of gentle because we've got all that gas that's trapped in there from our yeast, and we don't want to deflate it. We want to keep that gas in there so that we get that nice fluffy texture in our bread. And I'm gonna get a little bit of oil onto my fingers, and I'm just gonna kind of gently use my hands to kind of lift and stretch my dough. So I've got it pressed into my pan basically as much as I possibly can. It's not quite reaching the edges of my pans, and especially if you're using that larger half sheet pan, you may not get it to reach completely to all of the edges, and that's okay. You just kind of want to get it as much as possible. We're now going to let this rest one more time. So that gives us a total of 3 resting periods. We're going to again put this in a warm area of our kitchen for another about 45 minutes. It's gonna get really puffy looking. We're gonna get to see some bubbles happening on the surface again. And it'll start to fill up our pan a little bit more. While our dough is doing its 3rd and final resting period, I'm gonna turn my oven on to 450 degrees to give it a good amount of time to get really nice and hot for our bread. That way our oven will be nice and ready for us in 45 minutes when we go to put that bread in there. We can see how puffy it is, okay? It has really filled our pan very nicely, and it looks nice and puffy. It's risen quite a bit. If I touch it, it's not sticking to my fingers. And in fact, it feels a little bit bouncy, a little bit springy. So this looks great. Get a little bit of olive oil on our fingers. I've got a little bowl here, okay? And then using my fingertips, I'm gonna kind of just gently press into my dough there, creating these nice indentations. Okay, this is called dimpling the dough. Just pressing gently. Again, we're not trying to deflate this too much, okay? I still want it to be nice and poofy, but I do want to create all these like little dimples and divots, because when I drizzle my olive oil and my herbs on top, those divots are gonna kind of create like little pools of olive oil, which gives us a lot of flavor. So at this point, this is when you could kind of top it with whatever toppings you choose. And then one of the most important things that we need to sprinkle on top is some salt, okay? I like to use a little bit of flaky salt. It's got these nice big flakes and gives you some really good flavor. So take a really nice big pinch, it's like a 4-finger pinch there, and I'm really gonna sprinkle it all over the top. And just like olive oil, we really don't wanna skimp on this. And it's gonna bake between 20 and 30 minutes. Our focaccia has finished baking. It was in the oven for about 25 minutes. And you can see that it looks so amazing, nice and golden brown, nice and crispy. And we can see that beautiful crumb, looks amazing, smells amazing, that steam coming off of there. So this is gonna be a delicious treat. So I hope that you all had a lot of fun with this video and you feel that you can accomplish this focaccia at home. Thank you for joining me for our Pilot Light Family Meal Focaccia. And you can access this along with a lot of other Pilot Light Family Meal videos and education plans at pilotlight.org. Thanks and good luck making your focaccia.
We want to know how you and your family are enjoying this recipe and making it together. So tag us. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Pilot Light Chefs, #PLFamilyMeal.